and have become the top HIPAA compliance tool in the industry. And in this webinar, our goal is to break down HIPAA compliance by walking you through the ins and outs of the regulation since the moment it was enacted in 1996. And you're going to find out how to avoid common mistakes that result from misunderstandings of the regulation and learn how to take HIPAA compliance into your own hands and to protect your practice from OCR audits and fines. So with that, Joe, thank you so much for teaching us today. You have the mic.
Yeah, thank you, Kendall. Much appreciated. Hopefully everybody can hear me out there. Any issues, please let us know. Thank you very much to the association and Kendall Matthews for letting Compliancy Group onto today's workshop. So as discussed, today's topic is a guide to understanding HIPAA compliance and passing your audit. We are Compliancy Group. Not to spend too much time on exactly who we are, but I think it's very important to understand, where that education is coming from. If I would just take a step back, obviously Kendall and his team, very great organization. If you need any support in the area, definitely reach out to Kendall, just very good at what he does. Compliancy Group, I'm going to get into in a second. Obviously, I just explained, Joe Macedo. I am a channel partner manager at Compliancy Group. My role is with the organization as I work with a lot of the IT firms that take HIPAA compliance very seriously. Something we'll learn on today's webinar. There is a difference between compliance and security. A lot of people tend to get those two things confused, but I think it's very important to go over the finer details on what exactly is meant by that. But Compliancy Group in general, we started in 2005. We were large-scale HIPAA auditors. That's all we did. We take care of the healthcare industry. If you take, let's say, Los Angeles, California, we did all 9 of their major hospitals. We did 1,200 of their clinics, countless other engagements worldwide. We did say worldwide because we do also, there's vendors that work inside of the United States. They promote or work with, let's say, hospitals and medical organizations, and they provide, let's say, software and hardware. They are business associates in the eyes of HHS, so they have to be HIPAA compliant as well. But Compliancy Group, we are all over the country. We're about 20,000 organizations strong. We're endorsed by about 40 plus medical associations. We are known in the industry for the GUARD. The GUARD is a web-based solution. It really helps you achieve, illustrate, and fully maintain your HIPAA compliance. We combine that with a coaching methodology, really to really teach you a culture of compliance, not just throw documentation at you. And we're looking at things from an auditor's point of view. So one of the things that we have going for us, no single client of ours has ever failed a HIPAA audit. We've been in business, obviously, since 2005. Countless engagements, or I should say audits happening on a monthly basis. None of our clients have ever failed an audit. The other thing is 100% of our clients would refer us to a friend. I don't think that makes us perfect, but anybody who's ever answered the survey from us really appreciates the level of expertise and support that they get from Compliancy Group. Compliancy Group, as mentioned, we are all over the country. Just wanted to say that, but enough about Compliancy Group. So we're really here to learn about HIPAA, right? So that's why we're on the call today. Hopefully this will be very informative for you guys. What I'm not planning on doing is really drowning you in regulation today, but I definitely want to hit some high-level overview points, what's going on in the industry, and obviously what it means to be HIPAA compliant and what you really need to do for your own organization to be safe. All right, so when we start into HIPAA, there's 700 pages of HIPAA regulation. And anybody who's ever tried to read any of this documentation or try to make sense of it outside of the basic concepts that HIPAA requires, it's not the easiest thing to do. If you take different specialties and different specialties in the industry, a large hospital is much different from a chiropractic association compared to a dental association compared to, let's say, some of Kendall's vendors who are in the IT realm who also need to be compliant. These are very different organizations, and some of you on the call today, even more different than what I said just now. So there's different specialties, and people are left a little bit confused on what's important for them compared to the next specialty, right? So you might not line up very well with a large hospital, but you still have to adhere to the same regulation. So it is very confusing. We often said that if the government put out very good information, organizations wouldn't need a company like Compliancy Group. But it is very confusing out there, as you know. One of the most confusing parts, and I would start here, a very important slide, compliance versus security, really playing into the theme of what we're going to talk about today. If you look what's on the right-hand side of the screen, there's two elements that go into HIPAA compliance. It's actual compliance, I call it the soft side, documentational things, which is really what Compliancy Group does, and then security, which is on your right-hand side, really locking down the network, let's say, or securing your email, making sure it's encrypted, having certain safeguards in place on the network is very important element of compliance, but it's not the only thing. A lot of organizations today, they believe that if they're highly secure, they're highly compliant. That's just not the case at all. For example, the government looks at all the safeguards you're doing, and I call that the hard side of compliance, or the, let's call it technical safeguards that you have in place to protect your delicate PHI that you have. It's really about mitigating the risk of an actual breach from happening. Part of a HIPAA compliance plan, but not the overall plan. The government looks at it as mitigating risk. Let's say you do have a breach, and what do I mean by that? But security breach when it comes to HIPAA, so unauthorized access to medical information, people stealing medical information, people gaining access to the network, let's say through one of your employees, through a phishing attack, something like that, that actually gets somebody else with unauthorized access on the network, that would cause a HIPAA breach, which could potentially cause a HIPAA audit. When that audit occurs, a lot of organizations believe that they're going to get fined because of the actual breach. The security was broken, something happened, so they're going to get fined for that. That's not the case at all, believe it or not. The government gives you a chance to defend yourself. That defense is proving whether or not you have an effective compliance program in place, and that's what we're going to talk about today. It's really about the soft side documentation, the elements of compliance, the audits you have to go through, the policies, the procedures, the employee training, the physical documentation, and you have to prove that you have this effective compliance plan every 12 months. So very important concept that security is very important. It's the outer shell, if you would, of protection for the organization, but the soft gooey center, the inside of your organization, inside the four walls, having that documentation in place is really what's going to help you avoid a fine. That's what Compliancy Group does, is we make sure we help prove that you have this effective plan in place. Thus, you would avoid a fine. So even though you had a breach, does not mean you have to get a fine. Find yourself without the documentation needed, even though you had a breach and you were highly secure otherwise, you'll find yourself with a hefty fine. Sort of playing into the theme a little bit, we're going to break down some concepts here on today's webinar. Playing into the last slide theme, there is 3 rules of HIPAA. HIPAA is really about 3 rules. There's the privacy rule, security rule, and breach notification rule. So a whole bunch of regulation that goes under each rule, but really just to illustrate what's going on when it pertains to security, because security is such a big topic today. A lot of organizations believe that if they did their security risk assessment, they analyzed the risk on their network and they put in proper safeguards, that they would have satisfied not only the security rule, but as we talked about, overall HIPAA compliance. But you can see there's 3 rules of HIPAA. Underneath just the security rule, technology is really just one of the audits under that security rule. So it's very important to realize that security, what they mean by security for HIPAA compliance is not what you're thinking of as security and technology. It's a portion of it, but there is other audits to go through for the organization, like physical security, and through your administrative practice. How are you protecting PHI on a daily basis? That's what they also want to see. And that's also other audits you have to go through besides the security risk assessment. The reason it's so prevalent today in the market is a lot of organizations want to get their security risk assessment. It's one of the things needed for the meaningful use or macro MIPS attestation. So those of you who are not familiar with that is, obviously you get a higher percentage payout on Medicare and Medicaid if you submit certain things to the government. A big chunk of that is showing them that you're secure on the network and providing that audit. So a lot of organizations run to their IT company saying, hey, I need that security risk assessment. I need to attest, let's say, for macro MIPS or meaningful use, which is the old name. So they get that security risk assessment, but they're failing to address the rest of what is required by HIPAA. We often said that if you were HIPAA compliant, you would have had almost every single thing you need for meaningful use. HIPAA compliance, again, the omnibus rule I really want to touch on right now, which is a change in regulation in 2013. So we all knew the covered entity. The covered entities, many of you on the call, would be directly dealing with PHI. Obviously, you're doing treatment of, you're billing out, you're exposed to PHI, you're in medical. That's direct covered entity practice. Now, also, as of 2013, the government identified somebody as a business associate. So business associate is a vendor of your practice. Now, a lot of organizations believe they may have only one or two business associates, but the government's definition of a business associate is anybody with potential access to PHI. So it's very important to understand it's not somebody who has access to your system at all times. It's somebody who may be on site. It may be a consultant. It may be your accountant. It could be a lawyer. It most definitely is your technology company, your hosting provider, your EHR provider. So there's a lot of certain things that go into what is constituted business associates. So one of the takeaways maybe from this call is just really understand who your BAs are. They call them BAs. Business associates need a business associate agreement as of 2013. So you as the covered entity are 100% responsible for giving your vendor a business associate agreement. What is a business associate agreement? Well, it's a separate agreement. It's something that states basically that you both need to be HIPAA compliant. So that's right. Even your IT company you work with today, they must be HIPAA compliant to legally do business with you. But you are responsible for giving them an agreement, and it's going to separate the liability. If you want more information on that, obviously you can reach out to us. I'd be happy to talk more about business associate agreements. Part of that omnibus rule is conducting due diligence. So Compliancy Group helps with all this. This is just some of the things that we do, but the government mandates that you actually conduct due diligence on your business associates. So what does that mean? You already got them to sign a business associate agreement. They're stating they're HIPAA compliant, but the government wants you to take a step further. You are to check their technical ability to protect PHI. So however you would like to do that, sometimes the government leaves things open for interpretation. That is exactly the case here. So what we do is we take a 42-point questionnaire. We make sure that your vendors are adhering to the proper safeguards required by HIPAA. So it's very important that you conduct due diligence on your vendors in some way, shape, or form. So that's another takeaway for today's call. You do have to reach out to your vendors. You do have to ask some questions. So that's definitely part of that omnibus rule that came into effect in 2013. Okay, so not to scare too many people on the call, I'm just calling the facts. And one of the things I would say, a lot of the organizations on the call today, if you would have came to Compliancy Group, let's say 10 years ago, closer even towards 5 years ago, we would have told you to be highly secure. Not that we wouldn't want you to be HIPAA compliant, but we didn't think you were going to be a big target. So part of what Compliancy Group does is we have a solution for small, mid-sized practices. That's really where we concentrate on. A lot of our auditing friends only want to do large-scale practices, $40,000 engagements and more. We knew this was coming down the pipe. We knew the government enforcement was definitely coming down. As of 2013, it's over $72 million in fines. Since 2016, $44+ million in fines. And what you're seeing over the last, since the omnibus rule, you're seeing a lot more smaller, mid-sized practices being audited and fined. You're also seeing nonprofits being audited and fined, and also business associates. So believe it or not, organizations even outside of medical, so take IT firms that I work with, for example, they get fined as well. So a business associate fine, one of the larger ones I know of, is a $650,000 fine in 2017. So it's very important that organizations take compliance seriously, even if you are not directly in medical. So why do people really, well, one other thing I would just add, I'm sorry about that, I'm just jumping around a little bit. There are obviously 3 prison sentences. One thing I would say is they can revoke the medical license. And just the last thing, the state attorney general can levy fines as well. So it's interesting. Some of the last HIPAA fine, there was one in, I believe, New Jersey last month where the state attorney general actually levied the fine. That's coming down more and more. So you're seeing California, New Jersey was the first 2 states to crack. It's just going down the line. So you're going to see a state attorney general getting involved with fines, not just HHS or Health and Human Services. They use Office of Civil Rights, which is the enforcement arm for HIPAA. Why do people fail their audit? Really getting into the meat of what we're talking about today. Why do people fail? What do they have in place? Well, typical organizations that we run into, especially a small, mid-sized practice, they'll run into, let's say, doing a security risk assessment, if that. Sometimes we find that they don't do that as well. Some organizations do more, they do less. Security risk assessment. So they'll complete that audit. They'll be highly secure on the network, or think that they're highly secure on the network. And also they have policies, procedures, and training. So if this sounds like you, it sounds pretty good, right? Sounds like you're protected. Sounds like you have documentation. What else would they want from me? Well, that's really why we're on the call today. I just want to go over some of those question marks that you see there. That's exactly why people would fail. There's a certain amount of things else that they have to do to be legally HIPAA compliant. When we talk about audits, it's interesting. There were 6 total audits. Only 3 of them fall under the security rule. But as a covered entity, believe it or not, there's 6 total audits you have to go through to be truly HIPAA compliant. So if you want more information on the names of those 6 audits, definitely reach out to us. We'll go over more of those audits as we go through the presentation today, but just if you would like more information on those audits, please let us know. There's 6 total audits for a covered entity. There's 5 for a business associate. So even your vendors who not even directly in medical have to go through 5 audits just to have a client in healthcare. So check your IT vendor next time you talk to them. So very interesting that there's 6 mandated audits for a covered entity, and also a few other things that they have to do, which we're going to go over right now. Before we get to those other elements that they have to do, one of the good pieces of information the government has put out is the 7 fundamental elements of an effective compliance program. They don't normally put out very good information, and I don't want to keep bashing the government, but sometimes we often said if they just took each specialty and really broke it down a little bit more, people can really understand a lot more about the HIPAA regulation. So there's improvement to be made there, I'll say that. But one of the good pieces of information they have put out is these 7 fundamental elements. It's really showing you what the government or an auditor, we should call it an auditor, is going to look for when they come on site if you ever are in HIPAA trouble or HIPAA jail, we call it. If an auditor comes on site, these are sort of the 7 fundamental things that they're looking for. Now, obviously, you have to be adhering to the regulation. We'll go over what those elements are. But this is really their cheat sheet, right? So they're looking at certain things. So it's very important to know what the 7 elements are, and it might not be the traditional things that you're thinking about. So really having a game plan, documentation is really the way to go, and really to prove your good faith effort in the market. So we're going to go through what that effective compliance program is. Really why we're on the call is we want to learn what it is that our organization needs to do to be fully HIPAA compliant. Now, the Guard is just the name of our tool. I'm not going to spend a lot of time today. Again, if you want more information, please reach out, but this is to be an educational webinar. Compliancy Group, the way we do it, I'll show you in a second, but we offer HIPAA consulting. The coaches actually work with you through the entire process. We help you achieve compliance. We also help you illustrate it. So people struggle in this regard, so we actually give out a seal of compliance that'll be a differentiator on your website. We send physical seals to the office. People actually click on them and they can validate your compliance through that seal. So it's very important to be able to illustrate your compliance in the market. The other thing we do is we help you in case you have an audit. So if you actually have a federal audit, again, none of our clients have ever failed an audit, and we'll be glad to help you at no charge to you. Maintaining compliance, we help all your employees stay compliant. So I'll go over what their obligation is. Really, it's just training. So they have about an hour's worth of training to do for the year. That's really their obligation. But if they're wrapped up in a HIPAA case, a breach, an incident, then we'll also take care of that with them as well. Okay, so what does it mean to be HIPAA compliant? I know it's centering the Guard, just part of my presentation. That's really our solution, but what we're going over now is really the federal law. So this is nothing that Compliancy Group made up or Compliancy Group's methodology. This is legally what's required. So this is definitely a time to take notes, but you'll be privy to one of our checklists at the end of the webinar. All you got to do is ask. We'll be happy to give one out to you. 6 required audits for a covered entity. So most of you on the call today, 6 required audits. Really, there's the audits I said I was going to tease out a little bit. If you want more information, I could definitely do that, but there's 6 audits. There are 3 categories of audits, but it's an asset and device audit. It's an IT risk analysis. It's a physical site manual audit. It's a security standards audit. It's a privacy standards audit, and it's a high-tech subtitle D audit. So a series of audits. So the next time someone says, I'm going to make you HIPAA compliant by doing your HIPAA audit, ensure they know what they're talking about, because there is 6 total audits to go by. And we see widespread, again, we see some negligence in the market today. So 6 required audits. You have to you have to prove to the government you're going through your audits each and every year. So every 12 months, you have to be doing all these elements that we're going over today. We simplify the process, so just to let you know. All 6 required audits, you have to go through them and prove to the government within 12 months you're going through your audits. You have to identify all the risks that you have compared to what the HIPAA law states. So believe it or not, you have to have some type of gap analysis to show, hey, this is what I've done this year, this is where I'm different from the law, or this is where we had some changes in operations or changes on how we proceed with certain things. The government's going to look for you to identify that and actually build out plans to address risk. So really that's what they're looking for. They're going to make sure you're going through your audits. They want to see the plans you have to address risk, but you have to know what those risks are to do that. But definitely remediation plans, having a detailed remediation plan is what they're looking for if you were ever to be HIPAA, have a HIPAA audit. Policies, procedures, and training. So very important that you must have policies, procedures, and training. This is both on the security and privacy side of HIPAA. It's not one policy, it's not 2 policies, it's not 3 policies, it's a series of things you have to have. Correct documentation. Most of the time when we present to an auditor, you're talking about 400 pages of documentation. Now, organization like Compliancy Group has a lot of that stuff written out for you, so you don't have to do a lot of that legwork, if you would. But the idea is there's a lot of paperwork that goes into HIPAA. Okay, so policies, procedures, and training. Again, every single year you have to review them. And why the government needs you to review it, let's say a policy changes year to year, right? So Compliancy Group is an organization that would keep up with that and let you know. But if a policy changes, you would then, the policy is now different. That would then change maybe the way you proceed with a certain situation in the office based on a new policy. And then also the employees that are training, when you train them on your policies and procedures every year, that might have changed. So that's why you got to retrain them as well. It might change the training documents that you have for your staff. So it's a direct correlation with each other. Employees must do training every single year. So that's one of the things I was saying before. Your employees are required, this is what the employees are required to do. They're required to do HIPAA 101 training. So they have to prove they've gone through HIPAA 101 training every 12 months. And they should be legally attesting to your policies and procedures. That's right, they should be legally attesting to your policies and procedures. Well, why do they have to do that? Well, we know from firsthand experience that sometimes an organization is doing every single thing it needs to do to be HIPAA compliant, doing all these steps correctly. But they have a rogue employee, let's say, that acts very malicious and steals medical information or exposes medical information or does something. The auditor might come in, and we've seen this happen, where they would say that what was not effective is training them on HIPAA 101, but you never had them really read, or in the auditor's eyes, they never read the policy and understood the policy and procedure. So the organization really was at fault because they didn't have the legal attestation that that employee read and understood that policy. So when we've actually had examples where we've shown the government that they had legally attested to their policies and procedures, and that was the get out of jail free card for the organization, believe it or not. So we're not looking to pull that card, or you're not looking to pull that card if somebody sends the wrong fax or they expose medical information on an accident. But the idea is if somebody acts very maliciously, you very much should pull that card because that's a liability on the individual, not the business. So important for employees to do training. You have to prove, we put document version control here because you have to legally prove when they've gone through certain things for the year. So they must do their HIPAA 101 training and have them legally attest to your policies and procedures. And you have to do that every single year because you have to review the policies and procedures every year in case they change. Business associate management. So we talked about that omnibus rule. We talked about the vendors of yours. They need to be HIPAA compliant as well. So ensuring we take care of all business associate management, but we have the BAA agreements that you need, but you legally need a BAA agreement and you must conduct due diligence. So Compliancy Group can help you do all that. Having an incident platform to manage any potential breaches. So one thing I didn't mention yet today, you have to report potential breaches to the government. And I said potential. So what happens is that the government, if you cannot legally prove that nobody saw information, so if you have unauthorized access on the network, a lot of you probably on this call, you may or may not have, we do a whole education series on what is ransomware. So feel free to check out our website on a lot of IT related things that can cause breaches. But ransomware is a hot topic, right? So if ransomware gets on the network and you can't legally prove nobody saw it on the other end, that's a HIPAA breach. And nowadays the government needs you to report it. So they want to make sure you have a mechanism in place to do that. So if your IT company or somebody you work with, if they were, are working with you and say you just had somebody log on to the network or somebody hacked your email system, well, that's a potential HIPAA breach that you're going to have to report to the government. Just in case you think I'm kidding around, the government last year was the first fine. It was Presence Healthcare out of Texas. It was a $475,000 fine for failing to report an incident in a timely manner. So a timely matter is 500 or more medical records exposed. You must report it immediately. And under 500 records, you can keep track of it through your process and send it to them at the end of the year. Does sending it to them increase your chances of an audit? Yes. Does sending it to them mean you're definitely getting audited? No. But if the chance is much greater that one of those patients would find out that that breach came from you, and once they do and that gets back to the government, that wouldn't be a good situation for you to be in. So just to recap, because I know this is really why we're talking today, all 6 required audits, right? So legally, this is something you have to do every 12 months. I cannot stress that enough. It is every 12 months. You have to legally go through your audits, right? You have to analyze the risk on your network and have gaps that you need to build plans to address. Now, this is not just security. We find about 30% of security. The rest is really your soft side gaps based on, let's say, any kind of policy change or the way you're operating your practice, or maybe you change locations or you added certain peripheral, let's say, fax machines or printers or computers to the office. That's going to trigger what I mean by a gap that you have to just make sure that that gets fixed, but you have to identify that. So it's more than just technology. Very important to know that. You have to build those plans out, and an auditor would want to see those plans. You have to know what those plans are. You have to have goals to address those plans. Policies, procedures, and training, like I said before, you have to have the proper language in those documents, but also be reviewing them each year. Your employees must do training, and they must legally attest to policies and procedures. Also, business associate management, all the vendors, right? You have to conduct the due diligence, and you have to get a business associate agreement signed between you and them. And also the incident platform. How are you managing your potential breaches? The government wants to know you have a mechanism to do that. Compliancy Group gives you every single thing you need to be HIPAA compliant. We're very good at it. So again, if you want more information, and we're a very cost-effective solution as well. So it's not the price that you're thinking it is. This is the seal of compliance. So I'll lead this slide one more time in case people just have questions or they wanted to write stuff down. Definitely take note of those things that you have to do around that pinwheel there, but that's legally what is required. Again, that is not what Compliancy Group is saying you have to do. That is the legal requirement. So if you are far off, if you're on this call and you're far off of that today, there's nothing wrong with that. There's always a chance to get started. You have to show a good faith effort and definitely try to do that. We offer that seal of compliance. We're very good at what we do. We offer that illustration in the market. It will definitely help with your patients and help with the practice become just much more. People check you out online. They can validate that you are doing everything you can to protect their medical information. And if they're not doing that today, I assure you that they will be. Over the next few years, with the amount of attacks that are happening in healthcare, you'll be sure a lot of people are doing due diligence on their next practice that they go to. And if you don't believe me, one of the things you could do is start to Google some of your competition. There is what is the HIPAA Wall of Shame. Directly on Health and Human Services website, you will find over 1,900 records of people that have been ousted in the HIPAA jail, if you would. Now, remind you, when you look at these records and you dig into the archives, these are only people who breach 500 or more medical records. There is countless others that are under that. But the thing with the Wall of Shame, over 500 medical records breached, unless you really had a good, strong reason on why they should take you off that Wall of Shame, like using Compliancy Group, you are going to be on that Wall of Shame, and it's hard to convert new patients when they Google your name and you come up on HHS's website for a HIPAA breach. So check out the Wall of Shame. Definitely it's something that might be a little bit eye-opening. We provide a lot of support at Compliancy Group, so if you want more information, we are bi-coastal. We are open till 7 p.m. Pacific time. So we do have offices on obviously the West Coast and the East Coast, but 7 p.m. Pacific, you'll get a live body on the phone. The way we do it is you work directly with a coach. We have every single thing you need to be HIPAA compliant. Our tagline is we simplify compliance so you can confidently focus on your business. So thanks for your time. I guess I'm going to pass it back over to Kendall. I'm going to see if we have any questions. Let's see what comes in. I do have a couple questions on my end, Kendall, so I don't know what you're seeing. But again, thank you for the time, Kendall. I really appreciate it, and I'd love to answer some questions.
Most definitely. And folks, you can see why that I partnered with the Compliancy Group as a business broker to make sure that our healthcare customers understand HIPAA and the OSHA compliance. And we do have those bundles for HIPAA compliant cloud hosting and hosted phone systems for healthcare, even remote patient monitoring, asset tracking, and business lines of credit for up to $250,000. But the main thing is we're here, and Joe's here to answer some of those questions for you. And this is going to be a great time, Joe, to go ahead and answer some of those questions that people have been coming in. And folks, make sure you type in your questions so we can answer those for you. So go ahead, Joe.
Sure. I got one question. I knew this was coming. Thank you, Roxy. What is the cost of the program? Okay, so there is a couple different options, and Kendall, I'm free to divulge costs, right?
Yes, you are, if they ask.
Okay, there we go. That's the man right there. So let me see if I can just open something here. Okay, well, this is good, right? So you can see some pricing on the call today. If you look on the left, there's a couple different models. If you are 25 users and under, single location, you're looking at $2,000 a year or $200 a month. We also do a monthly. I don't have the monthly written there, but it would be $200 a month or $2,000 for the year. Remember, this is full support. We also help you in time of need if there is an audit. None of our clients have ever failed an audit. So $2,000 or $200 a month. 26 to 200 users, single location, $3,000 for the year. Or $300 a month. That's one thing we don't have there. If you are multiple locations that house PHI in those locations. Now, I'm not talking about little remote sites. So if you're a 15-user practice and you have 20 remote sites, that's not what we're looking at, the home offices or anything like that. If you have actual physical sites you conduct treatment at or CPHI, $3,000 for the main site or $300 a month, either or. You could do monthly or yearly. And then it's $600 for the additional site for the year or $60 a month. So a lot of organizations will fall over here, but if you have multiple locations, basically easiest way to do it for the year, $3,000 for the year and $600 each additional site. But again, most practices are $2,000 or $200 a month. Yeah, so hopefully that addressed that question. Thank you. Thank you. Let me see questions we have. Question from Jill is, what if my business associate does not sign my business associate agreement? That is a very good question. We get that a lot. So that question is, legally, we're going to tell you not to do business with them, but obviously that's not always the easiest thing to do. They really should be signing a business associate agreement. It's really, if they're a true business associate, if you have any trouble with that, one of the things you could do, I guess, is you can outline why you need to stay with that vendor. You can't make the move, I guess, because of something that's happening, and you outline the risk to them. You let them know in writing that you physically tried to send them something. This is legally something that's required, and you'll have some evidence to go on in case of an audit by the government. So just want to make sure you have in writing that you tried to reach out to them multiple times, and you can explain why you can't leave that person. But in all honesty, you probably shouldn't do business with somebody who's not going to sign a business associate agreement. This question, let me go to Ty. What is the sixth audit? Okay, let me go through really quickly. I'm going to go through what the audits are again. This way, anybody who did not see them, you can write them down.
Right. And Joe, you can take your time through that and really expand upon them because we do have time.
Sure. Okay. So first one is the asset and device manual audit. Okay, it really goes into the security rule. I'll just read something from that. So asset and device manual audit requires an audit in the form of itemized inventory of devices. So your desktops, your laptops, your phones that are connected to EPHI, and how the organization is protecting them. So there's an actual audit that actually outlines, you have to list that stuff out and actually show how you're protecting it. The IT risk analysis questionnaire just really goes into, I'll read it for you guys. I know it's sometimes the legal definition sometimes, but This is under the HIPAA security rule, requires an audit of protocols of when an organization installs or sets up devices. So i.e., if that's workstations, servers, routers, wireless routers. This audit is intended to synchronize a uniform device installation and device setup protocol across the entire organization. So that's the IT risk analysis. Physical site manual audit is pretty self-explanatory, really checking the safeguards of the physical site. Security standards self-audit, really an organization's security policies to ensure it has policies concerning all standards of the HIPAA security rule. So I know it's kind of vague, I'm reading the legal language, but it just dives in depth of your secure practice you have. Privacy standard audits. Okay, so that's another audit. That's the fifth one, privacy standard audits. Requires a complete audit of an organization's privacy policies to ensure its policies covering all standards of the HIPAA privacy rule that they are responsible for. So that really dives in depth about how you really accessing and exchanging of PHI in the office and through employees, and what they're really what they should be doing. Do you have all those legal standards in there that really shows what your employees know what they're doing when they pull out PHI at the office? The last one is high-tech subtitle D. It's a high-tech subtitle D / privacy audit. So it's provided to ensure an organization has documentation and direction on their breach notification protocols. So breach notification plays into what I was talking about before. That goes into, if you actually have a potential breach, what's your safety, what's your game plan on documenting that breach and then possibly sending it off to the government. So that's a 6th audit, and that comes from Ty. So Ty, good question. Another question from Roxy. I know there is a slide on this, but I didn't see it fully. What is the average time commitment? Good question, Roxy. Thank you. I was trying not to be too salesy on the call, so I just skipped a little bit about Compliancy Group. But if you want to learn more about us, that's great. So just here, if you look on the left-hand side, we work directly. The coach is going to work directly with you guys. You're going to have a compliance officer or somebody that you assign to this. And again, we simplify it so it doesn't have to be somebody who knows a lot about HIPAA. I hate to say that, but that's really the truth. We'll teach them along the way, but it could be a lot of times the office manager. But you're looking at about 15 hours of work for the year. So good question, Roxy. A lot of people just don't know. 15 hours of work for the year. We go on your pace. You meet with the coach, but on average, it takes about 2 to 3 months. That's how we see people split out their time. But you can more than willing and more than able to get done a lot sooner. After you're complete, you still have 10 months of the engagement with us. We're gonna stay with you. Let's say it's 2 months you complete the process. Obviously, we're there to answer any questions. We're not going to say we're your legal counsel, but we're going to save you a couple trips to the law firm, so you don't have to pull that card and run that meter every single time you have a HIPAA question. We're going to answer that for you. We'll be your ongoing consultant. You always work with the same coach. And again, in case you actually have an audit, we'll be there in time of need. Another question is, are labs that we use considered BAs? That's a good question. It really goes into it. They should be. So we have a lot of labs. So thanks, Roxy, for that again. Guys, feel free to fire questions away if you want some more. But Roxy's asking some good questions. The labs that you guys use, BAs, if they are exposed in any way, shape, or form to PHI, you better believe that they are a BA. They need to be HIPAA compliant. So in some cases, the labs actually is the covered entity. So it's very important depending on what they do. But if they are exposed to that PHI, if they're receiving that information, or they're helping in exchange of that information, and believe me, we have plenty of labs, I'm going to go out on a limb. Now, I'm not the legal counsel here, but I'm going to say yes. Those labs are considered BAs. We can look at them individually. We'll talk to you about them. So if you have any questions on that, Roxy, definitely let us know. Much appreciated. I have another question here. You mentioned the difference between security and compliance. My IT firm only does the it only does a security risk assessment. They say they're HIPAA compliant. I'm not really sure. That's a good question. And, one of the things is, Kendall will be the first one to tell you. You guys can reach out to Kendall or Compliancy Group for that matter. It is very important to have HIPAA compliant vendors, right? So if they're not going to be HIPAA compliant, they probably shouldn't be doing business in healthcare. So I'd say a couple of years ago, people were really learning this, and people are still learning, I believe, but some companies that really deal in healthcare really should know what they're doing. So they should have a business associate agreement. This one's for Ty again. Then you could say the lab BA agreement, then any insurance company you use, right? Good question on the insurance company. So labs, it could be, let's say, any application, Ty, that you have on the network or that you use that might do some troubleshooting, or they're part of a network that you use of computers. Any of those applications, believe it or not. So all the way down, believe it or not, people, if you use Microsoft in the cloud, that becomes a business associate to you. The insurance company is an interesting one. So it depends on exact insurance you mean, but also it's their exposure level. So if they come on site, there's a very, very, very good chance that they have to be HIPAA compliant as well. So they might turn around. Some people, most of the insurance that deal in medical, they should know this. But some of them might turn around and say, what the heck are you talking about? I don't have, direct access to your medical information, but government's definition is you have potential access. We see it all the time. We do work with a lot of insurance companies, but they need to be compliant, yes. That's a good question there. Okay. Think I've answered them. Kendall, we had a lot of questions. That's good. Good stuff.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joe, once again. And folks, if you're interested in continue to have more information from about HIPAA or even other type of educational workshops that we can help with, and of course we're here for that. So you have our contact information, and we are available as an additional resource for you to make great decisions as you grow your business and protect your business. And so, Joe, I want to thank you, Baron, and I want to thank you as well, and everyone who's a part of this great association and the great things that you're doing here in the state of Arizona. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate your time. So go ahead and have a great rest of your day, and we will all talk to you soon.
Thank you, Kendall. Much appreciated. Thanks, everybody.